Okay, so we are live now.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another live stream session. It's good to be here. I think the last time we did this was last year, 2024. So it's good to be here in January. Sage, how you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing pretty good. Excited to be here again to help answer questions, give some guidance about chakra and all the things going on in our world. Yeah, let's do it.
Awesome, awesome. Let's get started. So, my name is Esther. You're probably familiar with me, or if you're not, I work as a developer advocate at Chakra UI, and I have Sage here, who is the creator of Chakra UI. So, the main purpose of today's live stream is to answer questions that have to do with migration from V2 to V3. If you also have any questions, and even if it's not particularly related to V3, feel free to drop it. And if we have time, we'll come back to answer the questions. All right. So,
Yeah.
Sage, fire on.
Okay. I don't know. It's probably our first live stream this year, right? For chakra at least. So happy New Year,
Yeah.
everyone.
Yeah. Happy New
uh,
Year, guys.
so I think we just want to talk through like V3. What are the top things that comes to mind? What are the top questions that we have for V3
Yeah.
migration?
Yeah. So, from the last time we worked, because we had a previous migration guide. So, if you've not seen it, last year we had the initial live stream on migration. So, based off of that, I think the major questions we've been getting have been about theming, customizing the theme, extending the theme, and creating, modifying variants. So, those are like the top questions that we've gotten from the community. So I know we also have someone asking questions here. So do we answer his question or start with what we have?
Yeah, we can take some questions. Of course. It's probably the first person to join this live stream. So yeah, that's the bonus reward, right?
Yeah, cool, cool, cool. So I will just take his questions. My question was not directly related. Let me show it on the banner, but I was wondering if you could advise. We currently have an in-house work in progress design system based on custom components built using Tailwind. And I just wanted to know if there are any important considerations before deciding to use Chakra V3. The plan is to create a component library with the components we require from Chakra V3 components as a base and with the default theme extended using our design tokens. Are there any key points or limitations that you can think we should consider before starting something like this? So I
Oh,
guess you
yeah.
understand it's a pretty long question, but they're trying to
Yeah, it's quite
they're
long.
trying to move from Tailwind to Chakra UI V3. So are
Okay.
there any things? The major thing is um they plan to use Chakra UI V3 components as a base with the default
Okay.
theme and also use their own design tokens on top of it. So is there anything
Yeah.
they need to think about?
Yeah, quite maybe quite a couple of things. The first one is like, Chakra UI V3 definitely gives you an advantage, in that sense because you have a base, you have a system or a design system to work with, not just some styling that you then have to build a system on top of, right? So, Chakra UI V3 comes with all that, like the token system, the recipe system, and even a way to make sure that it's type safe. So I think that's like those are the key benefits. That Chakra comes with. And of course, components and more components coming starting next week. Right. So I think you just subscribe to that like evergreen, ecosystem in that sense. So that's one thing. And then the second thing is when it comes to your design tokens, with the way the Chakra CLI is designed, I'll probably show a demo if I have time. You can pretty much just like eject the theme out of Chakra. So you can install Chakra UI, remove the theme system into your project. So that's what ejecting means. You pretty much take the default theme and put it into your project so you own that system, right? And then you can completely modify the theming system to match whatever you want. You can style every single component, the one you really use in your application, And I think that way also saves you some bundle size because you don't need a theming system for components you don't use. So, I mean, first step would probably be set up Chakra V3, eject the theme out of that. So you can actually like configure the semantic tokens, configure the component recipes and how they're styled. I think that would be like a very good way to go about building a design system on top of Chakra V3.
Okay, yeah, I hope that answers your question, Sid. And maybe if you have some time before the end of this live stream, it'd be nice to see a quick demo of how to do that, Sage.
Yeah, sure, we can do that.
Okay, awesome. So let's get started on the migration guide. Do you want to share your screen?
Okay, so let's do that. Let me bring my screen up here. 1 second. Okay, so what is the first thing we are trying to deal with now? I mean, I think you have a Notion document of different questions, right?
Yeah, I have a Notion document. I also felt, do you want to walk through the getting started migration guide, or we just go straight to the questions in the Notion doc?
Okay, let me pull up the migration guide and probably walk through that. Is my Zoom probably zoom a little bit more?
Yeah, this is fine.
Okay, cool. So, yeah, so here we have the Chakra migration guide. It's always a work in progress. I'm sure there are things we probably missed that's not listed here. If you find any of those, feel free to like open an issue or create a discussion about it. But yeah, I think the key steps is kind of the fact that we dropped emotion styled and reframe emotion. Um, yeah, largely because we were looking to reduce the JavaScript that's shipped to the client as much as possible and also improve performance. So we kind of dropped those things. Yeah, so the key things we require now is Chakra UI, React, and Emotion React. I'm probably looking to drop that one as well, probably later down the line, coming months. So we just have Chakra UI React, and that's it. So yeah, so that's like one of the key things. You, of course, as always, change your package JSON, install the new version, and then of course the major step that people might encounter is kind of like how do I refactor my theming system to match that. I think we'll take a couple of examples for this one.
Yeah, we
But
have
this is like
examples.
this is a very simple example. So it kind of makes sense. Before you had this extend theme function, and you just like put the fonts directly. Right, so we try to create some more structure around that. So instead of just doing extend theme, you actually like we're actually creating a whole system. You can think of it like this is your design system in that sense. So we're creating a whole system that takes the default setup of Chakra UI and just like overrides that. So we go here, we have a key called theme. Inside theme, we have tokens, semantic tokens, keyframes, and all the things. But now you have to go in there to fonts and then set the value, heading, and body. I think these are the things that probably like take a while to kind of set up, but once you get the hang of it, it should be pretty easy to go through. And now, yeah, so V2 as well. I'm not going to go through everything. I'm just going to walk through these key steps. In V2, you just drop in the Chakra provider. If you have a theme, you can put the theme up there. But then in V3, I mean, we are required to pass your design system in that sense. So if you don't have one and you want to use the default one from Chakra, you can pass that into there and it just works.
Yeah, I think that's like the key. Those are the key steps before even going into the fine, details of the components. That's like the whole setup of V3 and how it differs from V2. So I think it makes sense at this point to take a couple of examples, right?
Yeah, let's take a couple of
So,
examples.
okay, so this example is it has the theme, like a custom theme in
Okay, let me
Chakra
open it up on my
V2.
side.
Yeah, I've just pasted the link. Yeah, you
Is it
can
this
please
one?
zoom in. Yeah, that one. Yep.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, we have this example here which uses the V2 setup. Just gonna zoom in one more
Mm-hmm.
time. It's a pretty simple one. So what I'm gonna do is just figure out like how can we migrate this simple example. It uses extend theme on an exported theme. So I mean, I'll just set up a demo project with V3, and then we just look at how do we figure this out. Right?
Okay.
All right. So I'll come right here to my setup and create. I'm just gonna create a new project, just so everyone also sees how to set up a new project.
Okay.
Let's just call this migration. What's that command again? pm create vit. So let's
Create
use
Vite.
vit,
Yeah.
for example. Let's call this migration live stream, whatever.
Okay.
And we'll choose React, we'll choose TypeScript,
TypeScript.
and then let's just go in there. And with that in place, I'll pretty much just install Chakra UI, PMP. How is this spelled? Chakra UI React and Emotion React. That's in the
Yeah.
docs already. So there's PMPM add, right?
Install.
I think, or install, whatever. All right. So with that in place, let's open it up here in my editor. Zoom in again.
Yeah, this is good.
Okay, I'm just going to confirm that we've got Chakra and Emotion in there. That works just fine. So the next thing we want to do is pretty much to set up Chakra now that's installed, right? So I'll grab the CLI command to install that. So you go to the CLI. You don't necessarily need to use the CLI, but it's just an easy, fast step to set up Chakra with all the things that you need, right? So snippet add. All right, so this would add a bunch of things that I need in my project. We call them snippets. They're pretty much just reusable Chakra UI code, right?
Yeah, but these snippets right now add not all the component snippet, just a couple that are necessary, right?
Yes, exactly. So we just had a couple of recommended snippets we think that you would use most of the time. But again, if you don't need them, just delete them. If you don't need everything, you can always delete them. They belong to you. As I told you, they're just compositions of Chakra UI itself. So instead of you having to write this yourself in your project, which you most likely do anyways, we just help you do that or take it a step further, as opposed to just letting you have to do all this work again. Right. So with that in place, I'll just go into my Vite project and just delete a bunch of things, all the CSS that comes with Vite. That's something that if you forget to delete, then your code, your UI starts looking funny. So let's delete all that. Delete this Vite logos and clean up the app itself, right? So I'll just render a simple box from Chakra that says hello world. Okay.
Yeah. We also need to update the CS config, right? And config parts.
Yes, exactly. So thanks for reminding me that one. I'll just pretty much go to get started so people actually see the steps, right? So I did that one, which is to install Chakra UI. And then I set up the recommended snippets. And then next step, I'm kind of like setting up the provider next, right? So in my main file, I'll just set up this provider, which is what I'm trying to do next now. So I'll come here to the app or maybe the main file. This is the root of the project. I'll grab the provider.
Yeah, you probably want to use the Vite. Do you want to use the Vite specific installation guide?
Yeah, that's a good one. I can point to that as well. So that's Vite right there. All right, so there we have the previous steps is we set up the TS config. So the imports are looking much prettier. So just grab that and head over to, let me close this one. And just head over to TS config. I think the TS config of the app or node. I'm not even sure. I have to check that one.
The app.json. Yeah.
Okay. So let's just drop in here and see what changed, right? So we've got target. We got target, noise resolution, mostly the path. Everything else is the same, right? Target. Target is set to ES 2020 here. I'll set it to ES next. Module is set to ES next, so those two are fine. Module resolution, bundler, so that's okay. skip lib check is true by default. And finally the parts, right? So I just add the parts in there, put a comma, and we're good to go. All right.
Perfect.
So that setup is done. With that in place, we should be able to replace that with an art now, and it should work just fine.
Yeah. Do we I think we also need to set up the vit config parts, right?
Yeah, that's
That's like
probably
the last step. That's the last
yeah, that's
step.
the last step because Vite does not
Mm-hmm.
support this import aliases by default.
Yeah.
So it's not because the Chakra UI thing, it's because like when you set up this art thingy in the TS config, you need to kind of tell Vite to also check that as well, so it can resolve the modules correctly. So what we need to do is to just install that one. It's a dev dependency. So pm rd Vite TS config parts. With that in place, we just like go to the docs and just grab that and use it in our project. Okay. Let's drop it here.
Yeah.
And then we add the TS config parts and call that.
Yeah.
So this way now Vite can read the TS config and we're good to go.
Yeah.
All right. So setup pretty much done. We've got the provider there. Next, we would just run the app and be sure that at least we see our hello world.
Okay.
And then we start the migration. All right. So pm dev. It starts up and we see our hello world right there.
Yeah.
And so this setup is working, everything's all good. We can start using Chakra V3. Okay, so let's focus on migration for now, at least.
So we're migrating this from source graph, right?
Yeah, so we'll switch over to the source graph one. This is the source graph example here. So this person here has a pretty simple theming system. It just changed the global styles, the BG, and the color. So how do we do this kind of thing? Because V2 had this interesting way where you can pass in functions to change things based on color mode. But in V3, we just swapped that with semantic tokens and just structure things much better. So let's sort of like start with that one. All right. So the very first question you ask yourself is, where is the proper place to put this? Where can where do we set this up? So if we trace ourselves back here to the provider, this is the provider file. So this is where Chakra is most likely set up, it's right there. So the provider file composes two things, Chakra UI, the Chakra UI provider itself, and then this color mode provider, which is to provide the color mode functionality. So what we did in Chakra V3 is to outsource the color mode things to Next Themes. That's kind of like how we resolve that. All right, so here you see that Chakra provider takes the default design system in that sense. All right, so now you have a custom one. How do you resolve a custom design system? So what I'll do instead is I'll create a theme file here, or folder if you prefer, and just like point that to, for now I'll just do theme TS. All right, and I'll just paste that in. So in my source, I've got theme.ts file and I put it in there. So this one is kind of like no longer part of like the theme anymore. It's part of the color mode setup. So if you want to fix that, you can go to the color mode setup and just like change that pretty much. And all of this is just, these warnings here are like related to like ESLint. So for example, I could take that and just like either, so what I usually do is just like take that and grab that rule and just turn it off in Vite, in the ESLint setup, right? So I've got rules set up here. I can just add that. Tell it to keep short there. Yeah, so different folks set up ESLint differently, so feel free to check it out. All right, so back here, this no longer exists. The default is set to system, and of course, it's gonna read the color mode. That's the default. And then here they have like a global style going on. If you remember correctly, back to the migration guide again. One of the things we talked about is extend theme. Now, like you have to create your own design system. You can use the chakra one if you like, or just throw it all away and make your own in that sense. So when you see create system, it's kind of like create your design system, right? And you pass that to chakra and it just works. So with that said, let's see how we can fix this. First things first, we would let's call this our new design system, right? We will call the create system function from chakra. Of course, because this is called extend theme, this implies you're extending what exists in chakra, right? So I'm going to pass in the default setup. We call it default config for chakra, and then you override it. So in essence, this signature is kind of the same as extend theme, right? So just imagine you create a custom extend theme function, and all it does is start. Right, so that's one way to see that, right? So here we have a global CSS that has these body styles attached to it. So the way we can do this is there's a global CSS key in chakra. That's where you put a global CSS. It's no longer under styles.global.
Okay. So you use the global CSS key in this new system, this new chakra V3.
Yeah, exactly. And then we can just drop in the styles. So with that in place, we kind of handled all this. So let's kind of let's comment that out.
Okay.
Now we're left with one more thing. This mode function. What is the purpose of this? The goal is to the intent is to change the BG based on the color mode.
Yeah.
But there are two ways to solve this. One is you can use a semantic token, which is already built into chakra. So you can go into I think it's in the styling or the theming, look at the colors we've got. I'm showing that you can look at all the colors we've got in there. And these are all the plain colors. And if you come down to semantic tokens, you see that we've got a bunch of semantic tokens. And you can see that the point why they are called semantic tokens is that they change based on the color mode automatically. So your goal is just to kind of check, can I just use an existing token in chakra instead of making my own or using that, right? So what we'll do here is if you look at what this user has here, it switches from 100 to 800. And it's the closest to that is BG muted.
Yep.
Right,
that goes from 300 to 900.
No, BG muted goes from 100 to 900.
Oh, okay, I thought it was 300.
Probably, I think the zone level. I'll probably zoom in one more.
Yeah, this is good.
Yeah, so
it
you
goes
can see
from
that
100 to 900.
From 100 to 900, right? Or you can do emphasized, but in this case, there's no semantic token that matches this need because we don't have a semantic token. How do we solve that? You could just write that in line. So you go okay, comment that out. BG in light mode is gray 100, and in dark mode is gray 800, right? So that way you cannot interpret that logic. But again, without using any function, it's just an object that describes that condition in light mode. So this, in dark mode, it's that. And I do the same for the color as well. So color in light mode is gray at 900. And then in dark mode, trying hard not to use AI to write this one.
Gray 100.
Yeah, so gray 100. Yeah. There you go. Yeah, and now we've kind of resolved that. So this way we actually have this migration done. So it's kind of not done yet. To finish it, you can just export default the system. And now we can clean up. So just so everyone sees, this is before and that is after. Right. The major difference here is, one, it's a lot shorter. There are no functions. We're trying to sort of keep things serializable as much as possible. So there are no functions there, and it's just an object description of your system. So here we'll clean up all the imports, remove this before code. And now that we have our own custom design system, I'd go to the provider and remove this default chakra system and bring in mine instead. I think that's kind of the point of why we had that in place. So now everything is entirely coming from that system. And then you could just we can run that to see what that looks like. I mean, it's probably just a color change, but I mean, it's worth seeing still. So yeah.
Yeah, the
I mean,
background color changed. That's the major thing.
yeah, to make it more obvious, I just maybe use
Yeah.
like, I mean, it's like,
Red.
I don't know, let's do red 100,
Yeah.
something like this. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's probably still not obvious. Let's do 500 so we
Quite
destroy the
obvious.
screen. Yeah, so there you see, like, I mean, that's the global CSS setup there.
Okay.
And it just
Awesome.
works.
Cool, cool, cool. So this is exactly how to migrate like your custom theme, right?
Yep.
From Chakra V2 to V3. I know this was a very straightforward example. So take another example that has a bit more, stuff in it.
Yep. Okay, so let me grab the second example that you have there. Okay, so paste that in here. Yeah, by the way, this tool is called Source Graph. So it's kind of like, I mean, an easy way to sort of like find open source code out there. And you can just like use that to either find code ideas or like you can use it to also like track down usage of your library and sort of learn how people use the library as well. So it's a pretty nice tool. Yeah. Okay, cool. So here we have some project. I don't know what this project is. Probably some workshops, which is interesting. And then here they've got like Chakra UI. They are heavily customizing the colors. Maybe not heavily, just the gray colors. And then they're also sort of like defining their own button setup. So this is kind of like their own system for a button. They've got primary, secondary, and then they've got like the default size and the default variant. Probably going to be an interesting example. And they have the card component. And then here they've got like, they also have table, which is just add some simple variants to the table, and then heading and text, change the colors of heading and text. So let's take these things in order, all right? So I'll copy all the code here first of all, and move that over to here. For the sake of this one, I'll create a new file. Let's call this theme V2 maybe.
Okay.
Yep. And then we drop the existing one, and then we can close this one. So here, again, they've got different things, but let's break it down one by one. So I collapse everything here, and we just see what's going on. The first thing is there's a theme, there's some custom colors, there's some design system for buttons and cards. And then here as well, they changed the font, and then they customize some components. Yep. So let's kind of take it one step at a time. So we attack the colors and the fonts first,
okay,
and then we come into components. I mean, because we want to make that kind of easy for people to follow as well.
Yeah.
So let's see how we can migrate this one over to
V3.
V3. All right. So I'm going to, because that's such a huge file, I'll just do theme V3. So we can have that side by side. Right. Okay, cool. So one thing at a time. Again, like we saw earlier, I'll just start with this setup here. Remove global CSS, regardless of what it is. I mean, a lot of the time, this is what your like extension would look like. But again, you can completely throw that away and make your own. I mean, it's just like usually you want to extend what we have in Chakra. You can have a look, check the repo to see what it looks like. And then here we come back here. So the first thing we see is you have defining their custom colors, some gray colors, 50 to 900. So let's see, how do we customize colors in here? All right, so let's do. So here the way it works is we've got a theme structure in V3, and then inside of themes you can define a bunch of themes, right? So let's scroll down the list. So we see, so you've got animation styles, you've got breakpoints, keyframes, layer styles, recipe, semantic tokens, select recipe text styles, and tokens, right? So you have to kind of decide, is this a token? Is this a semantic token that I'm about to override or customize? Right. So usually, I mean, in this case, it's just a token because it's it's pointing to the raw value. And then inside of tokens, of course, you've got like all the different categories of tokens, animations, aspect ratio, assets, blurs, and so on. And there's color that we need to kind of think through. Right, so let's come here, colors. Colors. Okay. So here they've got gray from 50 to 900. I think our new palette goes all the way to 950.
950. Yep.
Yeah. So I mean, just add one more to help. But we can tell, like, I mean, add 950 just to make that complete. Yep. So that's what 950 looks like. So yeah, let's just kind of drop this in. So the first instinct is to just take all of this and paste it in. And then you paste it in and then you see these red lines. I'm like, oh my God, what happened? I just pasted it in and it doesn't work. And that's because the structure changed a little bit. We're trying to sort of follow a standard for how tokens are defined. And then there's like the standard we kind of follow is the design token format. I mean, we don't follow it like too tightly, but I think so let's come here just to show people where we got this from. You can see here, like in this format module, how design tokens will be specified, at least in the future, is you've got like some name of the design token, and then there's like a key called value. Right, so we just kind of knock off that $sign for now. I mean, if it becomes a thing, or if this format becomes the standard way, we can bring it back again. But that's kind of like the idea behind that. So the way you define the value of a token is by actually like putting value there. Right, so I just use AI to kind of like help me with the rest.
Finish off.
Yeah, that's why we have AI, not to do the groundwork.
Okay.
So yeah.
Do we need to define these colors in the gray key?
Exactly. Thanks for calling that out. That should be under gray, not just colors. So that makes sense. So this is how you migrate the colors. You go over all your custom colors and you do that. You should be fine. One thing I would do to improve this is, let's assume we've got a new color that doesn't exist in Chakra. Right, so I think I want to cover this as well. So Chakra comes with orange, comes with yellow, green, teal, blue, cyan, purple, pink, red, gray. So let's say I want to do something like, let's see, what color is not here? Can you give me one color idea?
Lime.
Okay, let's do lime. Right, so let's say we've got like a lime.
And the color.
Let's say we've got like a lime color. So one thing that you probably, maybe it's not too obvious in the docs, something that we can improve on. When you introduce a new color that doesn't exist in Chakra, I mean, what you have to do, I think we have a guide for this, to define custom colors. Here, creating custom colors. You start by defining the custom colors, and then you also define a bunch of semantic tokens. So this is what I mean when I say Chakra is a design system in that sense, not just like a styling library. Because when you have to define things as a structure, you have to follow, right? So there's the brand, the custom color called brand that goes from 50 to 950. And then there's also the semantic token that you have to define called brand. That sort of allows you to kind of specify, okay, what is the solid version? What is the contrast? What color should go for text? What's the muted, subtle, emphasize, and focus ring for this? Now, I mean, of course, you can do without defining the semantic tokens, but if you want to use that custom color in your components, we definitely recommend you have those. So I would just say just do that most of the time. So that's what I wanted to show for people that missed that. So yeah, let's come back here.
Awesome.
So here we've got like
the colors. Okay.
We've done the colors, and here we've got like fonts. Now, one common thing that you run into is like, I mean, the colors can be quite a lot, for example, or the tokens can be quite a lot, and you maybe want to chop it into different files. How do you make sure that it's type safe, right? So let's assume I need to take out the colors from here. In essence, I'm trying to replicate what is here.
Mm-hmm.
So we can create an object here called const colors, right? And drop in, just replace everything here, colors. Yeah, but I mean that works. But again, it's not like super type safe because I mean, if I just do like it's 880 and I put some things here, like it doesn't yell at you that there's an issue because you don't follow the structure anymore. So how do we kind of make sure that it's type safe? So we can, I mean, we've got some helpers here called I think define tokens, and then you can say that colors, right? So that's how you keep it type safe as well. So that way you kind of can avoid any errors or mistakes. So it can yell at you when you put an invalid structure.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things I love about like this V3 edition of Chakra is because there are multiple ways to do stuff. Like there are more than one way to do stuff, and you're still able to get the results that you want. So the system is
Yeah,
like a
exactly.
lot better than V2. I know, migrating can be, I think migrating is the biggest jump, which is why we are on this live
Yeah.
stream. But once you have your code in V3, like it's a lot easier.
Yeah, totally, totally. Cool. So the next thing we'll do is to bring in the fonts. Right. So we've got fonts here. All right. So let's define the fonts. Just collapse out the colors, and then I go here to the fonts. It's just going to follow the same structure. AI got most of that right. But the only difference is that you have to wrap that in value. Right. So you wrap that in value. Now you've got your colors and your fonts, and then you can add the fonts right there. Okay. So
Yep.
now we've migrated the colors and the
The
fonts. I
fonts.
don't have. So let's kind of stop here and see what it looks like in action, right? So this
Okay.
one is called Poppins. I don't think I have this font installed. So how do we get Poppins into our project? Should we do that now? Or
Yeah.
maybe we should skip that one.
Yeah,
Let
maybe
me use the
let's finish off this main one, and then we can like from top to bottom, then we can go to customizing font. So you want to do that immediately?
Yeah, I'll just check my font book. I'll just be sure I have Poppins. I probably don't, most likely. Poppins. Nope.
No, you don't.
Yeah, so that's kind of like a custom font setup. I mean, if you really need to do that, there's actually a
Yeah, I know
guide
we
in
have a guide on that. Yeah.
we have a guide for setting up custom fonts in Next.js and
In
Vite.
your
So
Vite
take a look at
project.
that
Yeah.
one. All right, cool. So we've defined the system and it's all ready to go. Next up, I'll come to the provider and import the correct system. So this is the V3 one.
Mm-hmm.
And now you can actually use these tokens in your project, right? So it just works as you expect. All right,
Nice.
so that's set up. Let's come back here to. I'm just gonna kill all of this. Let's come now to the components, right? So here, colors, fonts is all good. So now we have like some components that needs to be customized, right?
Yeah.
Let's pick the easy ones. I think I know the easy ones. We do like
Tag
button.
button.
Let's do button, for example.
Okay.
So here is an interesting one where like I mean button is the recipe. It's called a style config in V2. It's called a recipe in V3, and that's what we keep calling it to forever. I think. So we've got like base styles and we've got variants. And in the variants, you've got like primary, some styles of primary, secondary, some styles in there. And you can see you kind of interpolate some colors and then tertiary. So and then it changes the default variants or default props. And so let's see how we can migrate these ones over. So I'll start by copying that in here, and I'll drop it here. And then we kind of, I'll copy it one, I'll bring them back like one by one. Let's just kind of delete that. So we start here with button. The first thing we want to do is to swap this out because it's now called recipe in Chakra. So swap that to define recipe. That's the very first thing. Okay. And then the recipe, we've got base styles. I just copy over the base styles. And this one is an easy one because you just change that to base. Just base style becomes base in that sense. And then Because this is kind of like called a recipe, I kind of just like to call this like button recipe, just so it's kind of clear. It's not a component. So I just call that small b. Then it's got a bunch of variants. So Chakra V2 has like a thing called like variants and I think sizes, right? So this, I mean, these are kind of like how Chakra V2 is designed. How we do that in V3 though kind of changes a little bit, just slightly. So we call, whether it's called variant or it's called sizes, I mean, they're all just variations of the same component, right? So that's the first way to see that. Right. So the next thing you want to do is like, I mean, we call it variants. You can think of this as variations. Like this is where you define all the variations of a specific component. Now there are two variations of this button. So there's like the variant and there's the size. So those are kind of like the properties you can tweak for the button component, right? So now, this variance and sizes in V2 is technically equivalent to this in V3. Just so people that are trying to think about like how do you mentally map these things in V2, because you can kind of confuse this variance key. I'm like, what's going on? Like, I just copy pasted the variance and it doesn't work. No, that's pretty much not how it works anymore. We actually try to just make sure this maps correctly.
They're both in the variant key, variant and size.
Exactly. So they are just mapped as variations of the same component, right? I mean, so the variant and size is a variation. And in V2, you're kind of locked to variants and sizes only. You can't do anything else. But in V3, you can do as many things as you want. You can say, okay, I'm going to create like a shape variant, right? One represents the variant, another one represents the size, another one represents the shape. I mean, you can do that. And then you can even go, okay, I want to create a pressed variant and change it based on whether it's pressed or not, right? So this is pretty dynamic in the sense that it allows you to do as many variants as you want. So that's the key difference. So having said that, I'm not going to say it again. I'm just going to do all the work and just let's move on.
Awesome.
So here we've got primary. I'm going to paste in the styles for primary, just like so. I mean, that one maps nicely because there's nothing to change there. It just works. And then secondary as well, just copy all that. You notice I'm putting them into the variant key because it was previously called variants here. Secondary. And something obvious here is like, I mean, there's an interpolation of like the colors. How do we resolve this? So the way we resolve the styles is pretty much just like, I mean, we'll add a border width here. Let's split it out into different properties. And then we say like the border color is gray 300. Right, so that's pretty much the same as that. But if you really wanted to do it all in one property, you can. I mean, so let's assume you really wanted to do that. Technically in Chakra, you can remove that one and just kind of like strip out, I mean, all of that and just kind of point to, that is how you do that. Yeah, just point it directly, colors gray 300, and that will get resolved. But it's not completely type safe, which is why, I mean, it's not my preference, but you can't do that. I prefer to kind of list them out like so. Okay. And then, yeah, the border as well.
The same thing. Okay.
You can see that, I mean, something smells here because like, I mean, it's applying,
like repetition.
There's kind of some repetition going on. So there's a very good chance you want border width to stay up there and only tweak the border color as needed. So the default border color here should be gray 900. And then when you hover, it becomes gray 300. That's how to sort of translate this one.
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much the same thing. The tertiary is the same. No, I'll just skip that one. But yeah, maybe for the sake of completeness, we can do it. But it's pretty much the same, to be honest.
Yeah, it's the same thing. So, yeah, let's move on.
Okay, so there are no updates to the size. So we'll skip the size because I don't see sizes there.
Yeah.
Then here they call it default props, right? So default props is kind of how you pick the default variants and size in V2. In V3, it's kind of called as default variants, right? So since default variants. So since that key is called variants, now it makes sense when you see the word default variants, because now you say, okay, what is the default for variant? What is the default for size?
Yeah.
As opposed to here, when you see the word default props, you kind of feel like I can pass any props I want for that component and put it all there. Well, you can't do that. The main thing that you can do is to actually pick the variance and size in there. But now it's a lot clearer here. So here you can see that they kind of set the default size to MD and the variant to primary. You can do that as well. Just kind of change the default size already MD in Chakra. So you can kind of like just set the default variant to primary.
Okay.
Yeah. So now we've defined the button component. Let's just try and use it. So we come in here. So where does that live? I think I showed us what the keys are in the theme. So the recipes live in the theme. So you can just drop in the button recipe and just put it there. I mean, you have to use the key button because that's what's called
Button
in
points
Chakra.
to ties it to the button component, and then you paste in the value as the button recipe, which you just defined. Okay.
Exactly. So for the sake of time, so we don't keep going through everything, what I'll do is I'll just try and use this button component because there's one more thing I want people to know.
Okay.
So if you kind of come here, switch to the app, in place of hello world, let's just do an H stack from Chakra, grab the first button component, primary, and then secondary, right? One thing is instantly obvious, right? If you come here and put variant, you notice primary doesn't exist in this list, right? It's the default ones that exist, right? The outline, the ghosts. I mean, so you kind of have to ask yourself, okay, so how do I get the auto completion for primary? So I made primary. I want to see primary, but it's kind of throwing me a type error. The primary does not exist.
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
that is where the Chakra UI CLI comes in. Right. So in the docs, I'm just gonna go there. So I think in the theming we talked about this when you customization for recipes. So generally speaking, we kind of like always advise. I mean, we always advise that after you customize your stuff, always run that command. Right. So that's how Chakra the CLI will keep things up to date and update the typings. So if you grab that and we paste that in, then you can link to like the source theme v3, right? Yeah. So when we run that command, Chakra will do his theme, and he did not do his theme this time. So here we say you
Using
cannot
Node.
find. Yeah, most likely. So what I'll do is just going to check that. So we've got source. I got theme v3.ts, I think. Yep.
Okay.
I
Yeah,
had
I
to put
work
the
now.
extension.
Okay.
All right. So with the extension setup,
Yeah.
yeah, so there you go. Now the auto completion works, and then you see there, like now, if you hover on that, you see your primary, you see the
Yeah.
secondary, yeah, and everything just works. So rule of thumb, when you make changes to the recipe or create your own custom design system, you want to have that script run at
Running.
least.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So
Awesome.
yeah.
Are we going through the remaining components? So this is like literally what people will follow through and repeat for the different components that they've customized.
Yes, most likely. I mean, we could do one more for slot recipe if we have some time, but like, let's just move on to the other questions and we can come back here.
Okay. Yeah. But this was at least the way you broke it down, it was very easy to follow. And I think it will be useful for anyone also trying to migrate their custom theme from V2 to V3. So
I'll just
the next
one thing I'll do is I'll just open it up so people can see like what that looks like. I mean, this is what the user
okay.
designed, right? So that's kind of like the primary one, and that's the secondary one. No idea why it looks like that, but that's really what is in the recipe there,
Yeah.
and pretty much it. Yep.
Yeah. So
Next one.
the next question is customizing the theming or style config, which I think is what you've already touched on, right? The GitHub question of how to create variants in version 3 and ensure type safety. So that is what you just touched on.
Yeah, exactly. So this is how you create new variants, and then you run the CLI command for type safety. Yep.
Yep. Yep. So the next question here is when will Chakra UI kit for V3 be released? I think it's important, people are looking to also have the kit for V3. So do we have any time frame on when it will be released?
No, I mean, I wish I could give you a time frame, but we're working on it. It's currently being worked on by, one of our designers. Yeah, it's taking a bit more time because of the way the system is structured, right? The color palette and all the different variations and all the different colors. So it probably takes some time to figure that out. But yeah, progress, I think I'll say around like 50-60% progress. So we're getting there,
Okay.
but I don't know when we get to 100%. But I think even when we get to like 80 ish, we'll just make that published and
Rolling
keep
out.
improving.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be helpful. So how many minutes more do we have, Sage?
I don't know. We've done 50, maybe 15 minutes. We can take a bit more, maybe one or two more questions. Yeah.
Okay. So we also have a question about using icons. I know icons have been like a thing migrating from V2 to V3 because the way icons worked in V2 is slightly different from the way they work in V3 right now. But I know you released, you rolled out a new release recently, and that kind of somewhat aligns it. So do you want to speak a bit about icons in V3?
Okay, sure. So let's bring in. I'll just keep the same demos and just add icons to the mix.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
Let's see how
same project.
let's see how that works. Okay, so none of these. We just stick to this. So I think one obvious thing that might be interesting to most folks is kind of like if I wanted to add like an icon to the button component. I mean, in V2 you used to have like a left icon component. I mean, prop that you can pass that to. In V3, I mean, you pretty much just render the icon, right? So I think I might have like, so let's just say LU plus. So we have React icons installed for us, and you can just add the icon there, and the button automatically adds styles for the icon in it, right? So that's like one way to deal with that. And then the next way, actually, this was actually like primary from the previous one. And then the next way we can do that, let's say we want to actually render icons independently. You could just do like icon and just like put in your custom icon in there. So we import icon from Chakra UI React and put your custom icon in there, and the icon will do its job.
And it works.
Yeah, and then you can set the size. So now icon actually comes with sizes compared to V2 where, I mean, it's just an icon empty shell. You can do whatever you want. And now we actually try to make sure it stays aligned to the rest of the components. So you can set a size for that. So if I split my screen a little bit, so we can actually see everything there, and just like start the command. Yeah, there you go. So that one is looking ugly. So let me just remove that. So there you go. So we've got the button component there. Yeah, I think maybe what messes this up is kind of like kind of like the base styles, or something's kind of like
Okay. The
the
colors
default
that we
variant. Actually, that guy.
okay. Okay.
That's
Color
kind of
palette.
that's
Yeah.
kind of just like cut that off because I'm like, oh my god, it doesn't look good. But no, it looks okay. But so I mean that's kind of like the button. So you see that the moment you kind of put the icon in there, it kind of just works, and you can change the size, right? I mean, this is a bit too like puffed to the page. So let me do like a padding so we can actually see how that looks. Shrink this a little bit like so. And then you can change the size of the button, for example, to small or extra small. And you can watch the icon kind of also shrink accordingly. Right. So it's not like the icon is on its own, and then you have to kind of like really try to style
Manage
it.
the icon and manage the
Yeah, you don't
button,
have to manage
manage
the
the two of
icon.
them.
Yeah. So I mean, you can though if you want, but here again, you have like just the icon sitting on its own, and you can also kind of like size out the icon itself, right, to different sizes, pretty much, right. So I mean, you can set the size, if that works. I think there's one issue specifically with React icons. So if you look at the icon now, let's try and apply color, for example. Um, Yeah, there you go. So you kind of like just put the icon and put it in inside it, and it just works. I think that's like the best way to use icons in there,
Okay.
with Chakra. And then
Yeah.
I think the new version that I just released, I think if that is the version that got installed, one way people used to use icon is just put the as prop and just like do that. All right. So before like the previous version, or most likely the current version that people use, if you haven't upgraded, is like this throws an error.
Yeah, it throws an error if you write it, which is this is how it is currently in V2. So
Yeah.
it used to throw an error, but now with the new release, it shouldn't throw an error anymore.
Yeah, it shouldn't throw an error anymore. So at least because usually icons is something you use a lot in the project. All right. So like I mean, having to deal with all these instances and kind of refactoring them to that is quite a lot.
Yep. Yep. Awesome. So, depending on time, I don't know if we can go through the final one, which is like migrating components, like taking the model example for model in V2 to V3. Can we do this on this call now?
Okay. Yeah. Let's try. Let's try.
Okay, let's do it.
Yeah. I'll just kind of open a. So let's say dialog, right? Like in Chakra V2 is
Yeah,
called a model.
it's called a model. Yep.
Yeah, so just make this spawn page and let's look at Chakra V2. I think I'm zoomed in a bit too much. So I open V2 as a V2 site. Zoom in again. And then we go to components and we look for, it's called a model in
Model.
V2.
Yep.
It has all that parts. So let's just look at one example. So here, this is probably one of those. I mean, you have to kind of pass this open and unclose to the components. So let's take this one and see if we can migrate this over to V3. So I come right here. I'll just like put like model example TSX. So this is, I mean, if you have a project, of course, this is the first thing you see is too many reds going on. How do I fix this? You kind of feel a little discouraged, but I mean, never mind. As always, migration is always, I mean, a little
Yeah,
bit
it's a
annoying
bit
sometimes.
painful. Yeah.
So here, so what you do is like, I mean, before in Chakra V2, you're kind of required to pass these properties. But now you really don't have to because you have to like, I mean, you kind of have to manually bind on click and say when you click on this, it's open. You can do that if you want. But let's kind of like keep things the way they are and see how we can just migrate in V2. So in V3, it's called a dialog, not a model. Just for conventional purposes, like I mean, it's technically called a dialog, except that the dialog is a model dialog, right? So, I mean, that was the young version of me designing a model, and this is kind of like
It's
me
the
with more
older version of you.
experience. Yeah, me with a bit more experience now, and that's why we call that a dialog, right? So, when you install the snippets, I mean, the purpose of these snippets when we have them is like we try to kind of get close to V2 as much as possible and just help you compose things similar to how V2 looks like. So what you do is kind of like the main thing you have to know is that this is also dialogue. So let's start by changing that. So the first thing you do is just change this to a dialogue root. So we grab the dialog snippets from there, and then let's just change the component before we get into the parts. So it's called a modal overlay here. It's called a dialog backdrop. There, it's called a modal content here. It's called a dialog content. And then here it's got a modal header. We changed that to, I think it's called a dialog. What do we have a header here? And then there we've got like a dialog close trigger, not a close button. Yeah, it's all coming in. Let's grab all the body, the header,
the
all
title.
there. Yeah, and here we got a dialog body. All right. And then it's just some lorem ipsum text. So Chakra is awesome. Let's put it there. And then here instead of modal footer, we change that to dialog footer and kind of make sure we import that from the snippets. And then here, of course, we've got these classic buttons. One that can close the dialog. I think we've called this like a dialog action trigger. That's something that can actually close the dialog. So you don't have to do this anymore.
Okay.
And then color scheme, maybe not. Skip that for now. Yeah, that's actually called color palette as well. So you can kind of switch that to color palette. And then the button here as well, maybe it's a secondary action. I don't know. I mean, you can just grab some button, keep it there for now. Yeah, so I mean, migration almost done. The only difference now is you've got this use disclosure going on. Again, by default, you actually don't have to do that. So I'll show you a better way to do this. But let's just assume you still have to, I mean, for reasons. So what you have to do is kind of like just, I mean, change is open to open. Change on close to an open change. It's kind of like what you just have to do. And this gives you access to a bunch of things, right? So e.open, so it's kind of like what you have to do there. And then based on e.open, you can kind of like call that.
And I'll close it, okay.
Open or close it. So here you can still use disclosure. I think we probably removed a couple of hooks. And then it's open goes to open again. So there, I mean, you could do that conditionally, probably. Yeah, so that is how you would, I mean, migrate that component to actually get close to
working V3. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. V3. Yeah, to make it work in V3. But again, you don't really have to control the component every time. You can kind of like just like, I mean, move this button into the dialog in that sense. And then just change this out to a dialog trigger. Or maybe not change it, just wrap it in a dialog trigger. So that it's kind of clear that that actually triggers the dialog. All right. And then you can just like say as child, which means that like render the dialog trigger as a button in that sense. And you don't have to do any of that. You don't have to control the dialog.
It's a lot cleaner and more concise. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the purposes are very clear now, especially with the way the parts are named.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, don't have to do that anymore as well. So yeah, pretty much that's it.
Awesome. And I know we have examples of how to use like the dialogue in the docs. So if you ever feel stuck, feel free to reference the documentation. We have different examples of how to use the dialogue or how to use different components in V3 compared to using it in V2. So I think the major things to look out for is the props, right? Some of the props have changed.
Yeah.
For example, it was is open. Now we no longer use the is, word in front of the prop. Is just open, and like the boolean props also is just like disabled. It's no longer is disabled, for example. So yeah, we have a question here talking about performance. Let's quickly answer the question before we wrap up for this live stream. So Cuticat says, I'm currently having performance issues after the migration. I'm interested in the performance of your current page. I used the React profiler to check. It was like twice as long as before. To my knowledge, I know V3 performs a lot better, but yeah, I'll let Sage take this.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, the best I can say is like, I mean, send us your profiler information. Let's have a look. I mean, you can just grab the profiler data, export as JSON. To the best of our knowledge, we actually did improve the reconciliation and render times in V3. And I think one of the ways we did that is kind of to move the the system setup out of the React lifecycle. So it's kind of like not in the React lifecycle. That's why I had this create system function. For example, in V2, this used to be inside of the React lifecycle, and then we set up the provider. But in V3, we kind of moved that out. So it's no longer as part of the cycle time, render mount times, and stuff like this. So I'm really curious about that as well. Send us the profiler JSON, create a discussion, and let's talk about it.
Yeah, on GitHub. Yep. All right. Sage, this has been a great live stream. I think it's something that is ongoing because people are still in the process of migrating from V2 to V3. But earlier in the stream, you talked about components that are coming, new components coming. So do you want to touch on that? What new components are coming into Chakra UI? You recently released the QR code component. I think that was a very like last week's release. The QR code component got into Chakra. So which other one should we look out for?
Yeah, I mean, in the past, I haven't had good experience with telling people like what to look out for, but I think now, I'm in a much better place. I mean, to actually like, I mean, give an estimate and be able to follow through on
Okay.
that, right? So we've got, I think, the combo box component in the works.
Yay, combo box.
That one is interesting because you have to give a lot of examples. You have to show people different use cases for a combo box. And then we've got like tags input, so you can sort of enter tags, and I mean, maybe try to do a combination of combo box and tags input. So something like that is kind of like useful. And then of course we're looking into charts as well, like how to get charts, an area chart, a bar chart, a pie chart, all these kind of things. Bring them into
I'm
Chakra as
excited
well.
for that. I'm excited for chats in particular. All right. So many cool stuff coming in Chakra land. And I can't wait to, start creating content on it and helping developers as well in the community. Yeah. Any last words before we wrap up and close out?
Yeah, I mean, thank you guys for joining. It was sort of exciting to sort of share all the different ideas and thoughts. I mean, if you have more questions, please create a discussion on GitHub. And then if you really think maybe there's a bug or something you tried didn't work, you can create an issue. We're happy to help.
Yeah. Thank you everyone for joining the live stream and being a part of it. Really value your feedback, and if you have issues like Sage said, feel free to create an issue or drop it in the discussion. So we'll see you next time on another live stream. Yeah. Bye everyone.
Bye.